everyone's here, right? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee of October 21st. All members are present. Members of committee, there are a few agenda changes identified on the package in front of you, or not in front of you, but have been emailed to us. I will ask the city clerk to review the changes for today's agenda since its publication.
Mr. Chair, members of committee, members of staff, and the public attending today's meeting. These are the changes for today's agenda as published in the proposed consolidated agenda published earlier today. In regards to planning, under item 7.2, which is listed on consent, it's a city-initiated official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study in Wards 1 and 3. There is additional correspondence, item 13.1, that was published with this agenda as well. The clerk's office has just received, prior to the meeting starting, another set of correspondence that is identified as 13.1-2 from Miller Thompson, and it's been distributed on members' desks because it hasn't been uploaded yet to the city's website. If we go through later in the report, there is a new item 7.6, which is a supplementary report from Planning and Development Services regarding the Queen Street West Tertiary Plan in Ward 4. And this is a supplementary report to the original 11.2 item, which is a delegation from 4 individuals in regard to this item, and 11.3, which is the original staff report from planning staff on this item. Under minutes, item 8.1 are the minutes from the Brampton Heritage Board meeting of last week, October 15th. Those minutes were published late this morning on the city's website. And in regards to delegation items 11.2 that were deferred to this meeting regarding the Queen Street West Tertiary Plan, we have corrected the name of the firm, that the third delegate is associated with, and there is a presentation in regard to the fourth delegate from Weston Consulting that has been published on the city's website. And finally, I mentioned earlier, there's correspondence 13.1 regarding item 7.2 on today's agenda, and there's additional correspondence which is not shown on the screen but which is on your desk that is 13.1-2. And the advice that I'll be providing to you, Mr. Chair, is item 7.2 is on consent, listed on consent, but given the correspondence, committee has the option to either remove the item from consent to consider with the correspondence or to add the 2 pieces of correspondence to consent if there are no issues. And those are the changes the clerk's office is aware of, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting as changed? Moved by Councillor Dillon. All in favor? Carried. Do any members have declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Nope. So as our city clerk highlighted, we do have items in consent. Councillor Fortini.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to, if council's okay with it, 8.1, just put it into consent. It's just there's no questions.
8.1.
It's the Brampton Heritage Board minutes.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, please get on the board. Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I'd like to remove 7.3 from consent, just have some questions for clarification.
Okay, so item 7.3 will be removed. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask to keep item 8.1 out of the consent agenda because there is an item that this council needs to address.
So that's your prerogative. So 8.1 will not be in consent. Councillor Dillon.
I want to remove 7.5 out of consent.
7.5 removed. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve? Yes, that's a good suggestion. So I'll be moving 7.2 out of consent to add the 2 additional correspondence items. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Singh. All in favor? Carried. We go now to our staff presentation. Official plan review. Presentation by Andrew McNeil.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of Planning and Development Committee. My name is Andrew McNeil. I'm a strategic leader in the Planning and Development Services section. And I'm before you today seeking direction to commence an official plan review for the City of Brampton. The details are outlined in the companion report to this, which is the next item on the agenda. As many of you recognize, an official plan clarifies and provides a city's building objectives. It guides the realization of a vision for the future of the city. It identifies and defines the components of the city not as they are today, but as they are envisioned in the future. And it provides the policy framework to make that vision real. Our current official plan was adopted by Council and partially approved by the OMB in 2006, so it is somewhat dated. It has served the city through greenfield expansion years, but it generally can be characterized as more of a greenfield OP. And I think we generally recognize that Brampton is moving into a new future, a new form in its development, and we need a different kind of official plan to guide that development in the future. We need to conform to and be consistent with provincial and regional legislation, and provincial and regional legislation is now directing municipalities to curb sprawl, intensify, and grow in a more urban, sustainable manner. In 2012, Council directed staff to commence a scoped official plan review, and the terminology scoped is very important. Today we are asking for direction to undertake a comprehensive review. The scoped review was only looking at certain aspects of the official plan. There was not a general recognition at that time that the entire official plan needed to be looked at. A significant amount of work was conducted as part of that scope review, and we will build upon and use a lot of that work to inform the current OP review subject to Council's direction. But the key thing that changed direction for Brampton was the Brampton 2040 vision. In 2017, Council began the process to chart a new direction for the City of Brampton, and there was a recognition that the official plan, the 2006 official plan, was not in sync with the Brampton 2040 direction. Wisely, the official plan review was put on hold pending the outcome of the 2040 review, and I think there's a recognition now that a comprehensive review is more appropriate to implement the direction, the Council endorsed direction of the 2040 plan. A new Brampton official plan will chart a new direction for managing growth. It will provide a policy framework to implement Brampton 2040. Critically important is the way we engage people. We want to build upon the successful engagement strategy of Brampton 2040 to engage council, residents, business owners, city staff, and relevant stakeholders in the OP review process. This needs to be a strategic and forward-looking document that also has some flexibility so that it can adapt to change. It needs to be clear, easy to read, easy to access, so that a layperson can pick up an official plan and understand what we're trying to achieve in the City of Brampton. Clarity of planning regime is critically important so that everyone understands where we're trying to take the City of Brampton. The development community can understand what we're trying to achieve. When you're not clear, often it can lead to more time to review applications, etc. So providing a clear, predictable planning regime is very important to attract investment and attract jobs. This will also align city master plans and strategies that have been conducted over the previous years so that we have a clear and unified direction moving forward with the City of Brampton. There are requirements in the Planning Act for conducting official plan reviews. We are required to do this every 5 years. Following endorsement of or adoption of a new official plan, the rules have just changed so that you don't have to conduct a review for 10 years, and then it's 5 years subsequent to that. In addition, subject to council direction today, we are required to hold a public meeting, and we're proposing that for January 22nd, early in the new year, to discuss what it is that we will be reviewing as part of the official plan review, and there are publication notice requirements as part of that review. What we are recommending is a comprehensive review of Brampton's official plan to ensure that we conform and are consistent with provincial and regional legislation, and policy frameworks, as well as to align cross-departmental plans and strategies through the official plan with Brampton 2040, and that a special meeting of council be held on January 22nd to discuss the proposed revisions to the official plan. Whenever you're trying to change the direction or the trajectory of growth within a municipality, there's a clear process that you need to follow. It's about understanding, doing reconnaissance, inspiring your community about the possibilities for change, creating a vision that will guide the direction, testing that vision, preparing direction, policy direction, and then ultimately adopting a plan. We've already done the first three aspects of this through Brampton 2040. I'm not going to say that that's the easy part, but that's more of the fun part. That's creating the vision, the direction that you want to go. Council has endorsed that direction, so we're not starting from scratch. We're going to build upon that direction. But now the heavy lifting kicks in because we need to test that vision. We need to create the policy framework and take this from an endorsed council direction to a legal document, which is the official plan. To do that, there are a series of things that we will do, and you'll notice community engagement runs alongside of all of these components because we believe that is just the way that you need to do business moving forward. We want to inspire and inform the public about the possibilities of moving forward through a speaker series. We need to test the vision, undertake some growth scenarios to ensure timelines and guide infrastructure investments. We want to undertake a detailed policy review of the current official plan, and then come forward with discussion papers, and I'll briefly explain what all of these mean. Bring this forward into a draft official plan, and ultimately into a new official plan. In terms of timelines, we want to ensure that we have a new official plan in front of council before the end of this term of council for your consideration. We're going to set a target of Q4 2021 with the potential to move over into Q1 or Q2 of 2022 should we need to do so. The reason for that is the region of Peel is currently conducting their official plan as well. Their target deadline is Q4 of 2021. We are supposed to follow the regional official plan. So building in a bit of a buffer, if there is anything that comes forward in the region's OP that we need to adjust to, that would carry us over into the early part of 2022. But we would like to have this in front of council prior to any lame duck period or the end of this current term of council. Now, the first component I mentioned is a Brampton Speaker Series. We understand that the community was inspired. They were part of 2040. What we would like to do is really talk to the community about how do you make these plans real? How do you go from vision to a real, tangible plan? So we would like to have a speaker series in early January, 22nd, 29th, February 5th, and February 12th. These are 4 consecutive Wednesdays. We will bring in experts that talk about how you move from vision to action. These are people that have guided other places, and we will talk about tangible examples about how we can guide transformational change in Brampton in a logical and coherent manner. Our engagement strategy will be fulsome, including the speaker series. We will look at creating a community advisory group, and we will reach out to all members of council to understand if there are members that you would like to see on this advisory group. This is really understanding the people that are guiding growth and knowledgeable about growth in this city, bring them to the table and help us work together with them in a collaborative manner to guide the future of Brampton. Number of workshops, both internal and external, to develop policy, to test the policy prior to it coming forward to council. You have to have an online digital presence today, social media, stakeholder interviews, regular council updates, as well as the statutory planning process. We want to go well above what is the basic requirements of the Planning Act. We have also forming a staff cross-departmental team that will work and roll up our sleeves to create this official plan. We believe this is critical. You need cross-pollination of thinking. It cannot be a siloed approach to developing an official plan. We will also have a new website created that will be ready for launch, hopefully by the end of this week, subject to council direction. The policy review, as I mentioned earlier, we are required to conform and be consistent with provincial and regional policy direction. That will be part of this process. But it's also about consolidating and simplifying official plan language. We want to make it easy for people to understand so that it's very clear moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, there was a tremendous amount of work that was conducted as part of the previous scoped review. We will build on that. We're starting from a good place. This will allow us to move quicker. I know 2 years sounds like a long period of time for conducting a study like this. It's not. Oftentimes it can take much longer. We are confident that building upon the council-endorsed vision and the background work that's being conducted to date, that we can move quickly, and we are committing to delivering this before the current term of council ends. Again, this is about bringing thought leaders together and aligning master plans and strategies into a coherent direction. We need to understand growth scenarios for Brampton. We want to look at forecast capacity based on growth projections that have been provided to us by the region. We want to look at market capacity as well, testing those growth projections against market realities today. You can strategically intervene in the market if you know exactly what it is you're trying to do. But we need to understand realistically what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years based on market realities. And then ultimately, what does the full development potential of Brampton look like, and how do we strategically direct growth in a logical manner that makes sense for our infrastructure? There's going to be a lot of information that comes forward over the next couple of years to council. We need to break this down into manageable pieces so that not only council but the public can understand it. So we will bring forward discussion papers that breaks down into logical elements that will build upon each other. At the end of a series of discussion papers, we will come forward with a policy directions report that summarizes the components of the discussion papers and provides clear direction for how we intend to draft the new official plan. We do anticipate a complete overhaul to the OP, a new format, a new structure that will guide growth moving forward. At the public meeting in January 22nd, what we propose to do is to provide a detailed work plan for council as well as for the public to understand exactly what we intend to do over the next 2 years. We'll provide key project timelines and milestones so everyone is clear and can anticipate what we intend to do. We will also convey our community engagement strategy so people can understand how they can be part of this process and roll up their sleeves with staff so that this is truly a collaborative effort. And the Planning Act requires us to provide an opportunity for the public to provide comment on that draft approach. So that would be what we would intend to do in January. And that provides a very high-level summary of the official plan review process. Be delighted to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. I have several speakers on the board. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. I know that with this, we've been working with the region and the planning department and their official plan to make sure things are in sync. Election is today, so I hope everyone votes. That being said, because the election is today, a decision is going to be made very soon on regional governance. So just a quick question on any implications on the time frame, given the uncertainty of that particular decision on regional governance, and do you think that we'll have enough time to still incorporate any of those changes within this timeline?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We will see what happens in the coming weeks with respect to regional governance. From the City of Brampton's perspective, it doesn't really change the fact that we need to overhaul the official plan. So essentially, most of the work would carry on the same way with or without regional governance. Obviously, approval changes. Currently, the official plan is approved by the region. It would then transform and transition to a different approval body. So there might be some small changes to timelines. But I think what would make sense is to carry on today, assuming that the region will be the approval body for the official plan. If there's a change in direction, we will come back to council and provide an update with what that means to timelines. But I feel confident that we can still deliver a new official plan within this term of council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Andrew, how are you? Welcome to the city of Brampton.
Thank you.
Very good presentation, you did very well. Your first time in front of council, right? You've been
It is,
here about
yes.
2 months now. I've heard some great things, so I wanted to get that out of the way.
Thank you.
What I'd like to see is a funding breakdown of what the allotted money is in terms of the budget. There's a line in here that says that any additional resources and funding required will be identified and considered as part of the 2022 budget. So I'd like to see prior to and then what's anticipated for the 2022 budget as well. I also wanted to know if this OP review affects any timing of approvals for new or existing secondary plans.
Through you, Mr. Chair. On the first point, so when we come forward with a detailed work plan, we can itemize that and provide a breakdown, a budget breakdown for all of that. With respect to current secondary plans, our hope, we want to look at the structure of the official plan. There are a lot of secondary plans within the city of Brampton, probably too many. Our hope would be that we can consolidate some of those into the official plan at least. A new area that we would probably want to look at is Brampton West with Heritage Heights area. We would anticipate that a new secondary plan would be generated for that specific area of the city that would come into a new official plan. Regardless of the structure that we develop, there does need to be a structure similar to official plan, secondary plan, block plan. It may be termed something different when we come forward with the ultimate plan, but that structure would need to survive. And there would still need to be secondary plans within Brampton, likely in growth areas such as the downtown, Queen Street, Heritage Heights. So does that answer the question there, Chair?
I think what I'm getting is they'll kind of work, moving forward, they'll cohabit or work alongside each other to whatever
Yes.
the benefit of the plans eventually
Absolutely.
result in.
Yes.
When does that detailed, I'm just looking at the proposed timeline. When did the more detailed work plan come back?
So we would propose to do that on January 22nd.
In the January one, okay. My other question was, with respect to, so I'm sure you know all about the 2040 vision and numerous consultations that we went out, and we hit, I think, more people than we've ever actually talked to about any visioning exercise with the city of Brampton. That being said, I also heard back from some stakeholders and residents that maybe they were living in a box, but they had not heard what was coming out, and nor did they have an opportunity to participate. Is this OP going to be similar to that 2040 vision exercise? Are we going to take what we learned from that and try and implement this when we're getting this out to the community?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the goal will be to build upon community engagement. We will do everything possible to reach as many people through all of the different tactics that we have available to us. It's never perfect. We will never reach everybody, but we will certainly do our best to do so. And anybody that wants to be engaged in the process will be able to. We will ensure that. We have members of the Vision 2040 team on the official plan review team. So again, we bring that knowledge that was generated through that process to this process. And again, we will build upon that and try to make it even better for the residents and business owners of Brampton.
Just with respect, Andrew, the comment in regards to other master plans that council has already approved essentially, are those going back to once this OP goes forward? Are we going to be reopening those to make any minor changes that seem necessary, or is it just taking those plans and incorporating them into this OP?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this needs to have a strategic lens where we look critically at everything that's been done in the past. The goal is not to undo everything, but build upon it and set a clear strategic direction. If all of the master plans that council has considered over the years are aligned in a clear direction moving forward, then I wouldn't anticipate us coming back and recommending any changes. That said, if there are things that become apparent over the next year or two, then I think that we would owe it to council to come forward and say, we've identified, and I don't know what they would be at this point in time, certain elements that we think might need to be tweaked in order to get us to the Brampton 2040 direction. Implementing Brampton 2040 requires a different approach. So I do anticipate there could be some minor changes going forward.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Palacio. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. McNeil, thanks for the presentation. I had a question along the same line that Councilor Palacio asked. As you continue to work through this official plan to make it more accurately reflect the Vision 2040 concepts, what delays, if any, does that cause to current applications or applications that are coming forward in the medium term? I'm not sure if we got a clear answer on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The goal is not to stop progress. So applications should continue until we get to a point where we have a new official plan before you. The world needs to go on as we're working through this process, but we are committed to delivering this in a timely manner. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so when the city receives development applications, do staff provide guidance and decision based on what the Vision 2040, what the 2040 vision calls for, or do they fall back to what the official plan said in its previous iteration?
Right. Through you, Mr. Chair. The Vision 2040 plan is endorsed by council. It does not have legal standing, and that's why it's so critical to bring the official plan into conformity with the direction of Vision 2040. Because currently the 2006 official plan is what staff need to rely on, as well as through other documents such as the zoning bylaw. But that's the legal planning framework that we're operating within today, and that's why we need to update that framework so that it is more in line with the council's direction for the 2040.
And through Mr. Chairman, perhaps I can just supplement the information from Mr. McNeil as well. You know, as it is that we are receiving our development applications and processing those and receiving comments from all the various groups, including our policy group, staff is very, clear to, yes, look at in a very formal way the policies that we have in our official plan, because we have to, amend those if necessary in a very formal way to accommodate development forms that are being proposed and which staff may very well really have an appreciation for. So, while we do need to apply that formal lens to the official plan, we do have very, well-rounded and really intent focus on the vision as well. So if it is that we see that there are some really deviations between the two plans, we're very cognizant of those and really having the dialogue with our staff, with the applicant, about trying to aspire towards the vision document. As it is that the official plan amendment will be amended by way of a comprehensive review to more closely align with the vision, it'll make the lives of staff and I think developers much easier in that respect. But long story short, staff have to work towards, in a formal way, the OPS, but always have an eye towards understanding what we've set for our ultimate vision.
And through you, Mr. Chair, and you can confirm that aside from working through those two different blueprints, if you will, there is no reason to unnecessarily cause a delay to any proposed development.
So again, through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct, Councillor Vicente. Where we see that there's merit in elements that are being proposed to us, that we're just in having discussions with landowners about that aren't in strict compliance with our official plan, it's then that we're identifying that, well, that is the case, but we have a general appreciation for those forms of development, and really we convey through to all stakeholders and such that this is an item that staff ultimately can look to support.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, just one final comment. I would say that I was here the night that the 2040 Vision Plan was endorsed by Council. And I know that, as always, when these vision documents are presented, there's always a concern, and the concern was expressed that night, that turning vision into reality is something that takes a lot of work. And sometimes these vision documents tend to sit on the shelf collecting dust. And it's very good for us to see that staff didn't miss a beat and have worked expeditiously to start implementing that vision into all of our policies and all of our regulations going forward. And so we look forward to what the future of Brampton can look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McNeil, for coming in and sharing this with us. I think it's exciting, and you know, the public knowing that there's going to be such a hefty engagement process is very encouraging. With regards to the engagement process, we do have some really great citizen advisory committees here at the City of Brampton, Age-Friendly, Community Safety, the Cycling Advisory Committee. Is there a way to include some kind of delegation or some kind of workshop with the committees themselves to get their perspectives? I know Age-Friendly has done some really great work with giving their direction on how they would like to see the city be planned in an age-friendly manner. So I'm just wondering if there is a thought or a plan to engage some of these committees.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. I think we will reach out to all of the advisory groups and plan on at least, at minimum, coming one, if not more times to seek input in almost a one-on-one dialogue with the advisory committees. I think that's critical to the process.
That's really great to hear. And as with Councilor Paleshi mentioned, it is one of the hardest things to navigate is how to get this communication out to the public so that they know. So, you know, I think starting early is going to be really helpful in that. And yeah, looking forward to seeing this roll out and being supportive in any way that we can to get it out to the public.
Thank you.
Councillor Paleshi.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was okay, and then I kind of, Alan, you lost me a little bit here. So, from my understanding, applications, secondary planning in the process, or coming to, would work alongside the OP. But from what I'm understanding after you had spoke about the vision, and walk me through this, I'm starting to hear that if our secondary plans or applications that come forward don't align with the 2040 vision, you'll try and work with the applicant to ensure that they do align with the 2040 vision.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, in particular, like where it is that we're having dialogue with landowners about, you know, prospective types of development that can occur on key properties, and where it is that, you know, in that dialogue we're understanding that the official plan, you know, doesn't quite really work for them in every way relative to that development form. You know, the dialogue that really we have with them is, you know, and if it is that we see that there's some merit in that form, it doesn't entirely align with the official plan, but you know, the way in which it deviates is because it really, does closely align or work towards ultimately giving us or allowing us to end up at the goal where the vision is for a particular area, community within the city. It's there that we inform the landowners that, like, we see some merit in allowing some of that deviation to occur. And so ultimately it'll be a matter that we'll have to make utterly clear for council where it is that the development application is submitted, we're processing it, and we identify to council then in those cases, you know, that there is a conformity issue and really an amendment needed and proposed, but we see the merits in allowing an amendment in that way. And so, you know, it is just to say then that, you know, by way of the OP unto itself, you know, if it is that we see that you know, it does not allow an element of a development proposal that somebody would like to pursue that does align in some other way with the vision, like we'd like to have further communications with them about that and with council about that.
So if there is an application that does have a slight deviation, but it may be something that deviating in a good way in terms of more palatable for the community in the area, kind of newer way of thinking of something. We're not going to slow down that process to try and have it align with a vision when it currently is aligning with various other OP's provincial policy.
Well, that's very true. So again, through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, that is true. Where the applicant is wanting to fully comply with the official plan, then staff have to honor the official plan in every way. And so while it may be that we would ask the developer to maybe consider something, yeah, there would be no requisite requirement from staff through to them to ask that or require them to deviate in that way.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Can I get a motion to receive the presentation and move staff report, item 6.1? Sorry, 7.1. Moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is 7.2, pulled out of consent to add the two correspondent pieces. Is there no questions? Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. Item 7. It's in consent. 7.4 consent. Oh, Councillor Santos, room 7.3. Over to you, Councillor Santos.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just a question to staff. In reading the report and also the amendment to the bylaw, in the past, most recent past, we've been having conversations about the threshold being bronze. In the bylaw right now, it says it keeps the threshold at bronze with encouragement to get to silver and gold or platinum. But we've also had conversations about kind of new developments and intensification near transit hubs and urban centers, and actually looking at elevating that threshold to a silver if there is new development near transit hubs and urban centers. Is there flexibility still to do this?
Thanks very much. Through the chair, the sustainability guidelines that we've got here, as far as this amendment, are really intended to reinforce the current practice, to kind of institutionalize that, provide the guidance that's there. In terms of actually making a change to those, of course, we can initiate those, and we would probably want to do that depending on particular areas, particular types of development, and that's something I think we'd want to do as we move through those other processes. But that's an option that's available to council anytime. The intent for this was really to make sure that the administrative guidance was there, because we've been doing it. There's certainly legal grounds to do it, but this provides that clarity to everyone in terms of what the expectations are.
Okay. So the flexibility still exists, like for later on, if we want to do a pilot around transit hubs and urban centers. And I'm sharing it publicly just as another trigger and like a reminder that we do want to move in that direction. My other question is on the list provided in 7.3-12. Yeah. I know it's not limited to, but a number of councillors, we've been talking about other elements to add and make sure are covered with, especially with compact development and intensification or new developments. And that would be bike parking, looking at condo developments and specifically composting and organic waste. And what else did I write here? EV parking. Electric vehicle parking stations as well. And those are my only questions and red flags. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. So the first request in terms of the changes, do you want to move that as a motion or direction?
Through you, Chair, I think the staff had said that this is just, from what I understand, administrative thing to do, just to put it into policy. We've been talking about it for a while. This will set it in kind of stone moving forward, but there's still flexibility later on
So
to
that's-
amend it and.
Yeah, so
work
that
on it.
amendment, would you like staff to come back with proposed
That would be great.
amendments based on your comments of looking at transportation
Hubs and
and-
urban centers.
and urban centers? And again, you want to put a time limit to this? Maybe, is there a time, Alan, that, or Bob, that you guys would be comfortable with?
Well, I mean, reviewing the standards, we can always do that, but as I said, we were looking at that in some of the other work we're doing. We hadn't anticipated a specific review and update of these. I think, maybe depending on your comfort level, I'd probably put that maybe to the end of next year. Then we can incorporate it with some of the other things we're doing. If it's something you want to add a few things to the list, we can do that in a much more expeditious way. But I think what we'd want to do is make sure we're having conversation with the development community as well, to make sure we're not advancing beyond where they're comfortable. Right now, this is really the floor. There's certainly applications we get that are well above that, so we can encourage that. But if we're going to do a review of the standards that we're going to be applying to them, we'd probably want to make sure we've got that consultation process going on.
Sure. And the chair brings up a good point as well, because as we are looking at the Queen Street DPS and we're looking at intensification near the GO train station, for example, and other locations, it's kind of like if we don't start pushing for a silver requirement or threshold sooner rather than later, we will have development applications that are bronze, and then we'll never get to that threshold of silver that we all want. So just keeping in mind that if timing-wise, if we could have something come forward, that would be
So-
ideal.
May I suggest then sometime by next spring, to get that sort of feedback and looking at, what you mentioned, to ensure that we're really promoting those areas for, those type of sustainable developments. Would
Sure.
be comfort, and there could be some informal consultation, but we'll aim for spring, and, you can come back to us and let us know if you have any issues or any of those lines. And maybe meet offline to just get more of a further understanding.
Sure, that's absolutely something we can do, and we can also look at ways to incorporate that into some of the other processes that we're doing, in addition to that specific review.
Great.
Okay, that's great.
Thank
So
you.
do we have a motion there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not. So I need to understand, what is it, are we moving the recommendations, which are,
We're moving the recommendations with an amendment.
so we need to be clear on the wording on the amendment, because the official plan is to be amended as shown in Appendix 1. So I understood Councillor Santos was suggesting adding to the list bike parking, composting, and organic waste management, and e-vehicle parking. I'm not quite sure about the parameters of the amendment in regard to transportation hubs and centers.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll pass this as is, and she'll work with staff to come back with the future amendment.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So moved by Councillor Santos, all in favor? Carried. We now go on to item 7.4 is in consent. And now we are on 7.5. Councillor Dillon, was it? Yeah, Councillor Dillon?
This is an issue that came up in the last term of council, and the residents were not supportive of it, so I'm just asking for a recorded vote.
Okay, so Councillor Dillon has moving staff report 7.5 and would like a recorded vote. You're moving the report?
No, I'm just asking for a recorded vote.
You can move it and vote against it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Dillon. All in favor? We'll do it by the buttons.
So members of committee, buttons are now open for voting on the staff recommendations moved by Councillor Dillon as shown on the screen. Councillor Singh? Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams, I don't have your vote read. Thank you. All members present have voted, and the motion carries 8-1 with one absence. Mayor Brown is not counted for.
Okay, so can I, as we go into item 7.6, we will be going in camera, so can I get a motion to adjourn and move back, not adjourn, recess and move back in camera, moved by Councillor Bowman, So it's 1:46, moved by Councilor Wall, in favor, carried. How much time do you need?
5 minutes. So
5 minutes?
just before we recess, the
Okay.
purpose of going into closed session is to receive advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
Okay, so it's 1:46, let's meet at 1:55, please. 9 minutes. We ready to go? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay. Merci. Huh? Sounds good. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Okay. Merci. Are you ready to go, guys? Just waiting for Pedro. Good. Okay, back in session, everyone. Yes, we came out of an in-camera where we received solicitor's advice. No direction was given. We are now on to item 7.6 and on to delegations, 11.2. So our first delegation is by Neil Davis of Davis Webb. Come on down.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to, if you'll allow it, flip the deputants. I'm going to go last.
Okay.
And I think Ryan is going to go first.
Okay, just procedurally, do we need a motion? Okay, so a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to flip the order, and I will, all in favor? Carried, thank you. I will call Ryan Guter from Weston Consulting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I do believe clerks have the benefit of a presentation with a few slides that I'll use in my remarks, and if I may, with your indulgence, I'll get through the commentary. If I am running to the end, I believe it's 5 minutes that I have. I'm on behalf of the owners of lands, actually, that are currently comprised the majority of the landowners, and they're identified as the Queen Street West lands in the sort of purple color, the blue lands, the orange lands, and the green lands, notified by Rotary, Larencore, Cesta, and Mokan. Those are the language I'll be using for you. There are further deputants that will be speaking. This has been an item that has been subject to 2 separate deferrals and a process that started in 2016. A very lengthy process. There's 2 site-specific applications, and if I put on the screen a moment, this was the plan previously deferred, and you'll notice that the lands, the Cesta lands are outlined to the west, and the Mokan lands in the middle, with Rotary's lands as well as the Larencore lands in the east outlined in red dashing. I wanted to just highlight briefly the purpose of the tertiary plan. First and foremost, it was intended to function as an integrated transportation, infrastructure, land use, and urban design vision. That's the purpose of it. It's very clear that there's been a lot of work done with Conservation Authority, regional staff, and most importantly, a significant amount of time invested and technical studies completed to support the plan. And that is this plan. It has been modified, which I'll explain in a moment, but I want to just highlight, which is emphasized in your staff report, both in the August and October report, that it is a non-statutory, non-operative policy element. It is an illustrative concept plan. It is showing certain things, and none of those items are binding on specific applications. I have 3 specific points in my comments to you. The first is that one of the reasons for the deferral was to integrate with the majority landowners. That has now taken place. We now have a plan, which is the next plan on the screen, that is fully supported by those majority owners. And that was the basis of the deferral. There was also further technical study done to support this transportation analysis, infrastructure analysis. And you will notice that there is a park, which I'll speak to in a moment. But this plan has been the subject of technical studies. Point number 2, very simply, we understand staff have concerns with the park. I just note that the previous park size on the tertiary plan initially that was deferred had, although not measured on the plan, I can verify was 0.233 hectares in area. The staff have now identified in their staff report a request for a much larger park, almost double the size. That is ultimately, in our opinion, too large of a park. Staff prior endorsed a park in the range of 0.2 as shown on the screen in the center, adjacent to the swim pond. And now with the integration of a pond, which you see notated by 2 separate ponds, we have confirmed that there is an ability to have an integrated pond built in 2 phases, which allows for delivery of a park approximately 0.2 hectares, similar to the previous plan, and a pond that allows it to be integrated. So it's our position that there is no support for the park size of greater than 0.2 hectares. I also note that this location is preferred because of the area comprising a number of other types of dwellings. That allows the opportunity for amenity space to be provided with some of the higher densities. So that's taking place on the Rotary lands, the south block as well, in Mulcons, as well as the 2 other parcels. So the third point I would like to, and again, very simply, it's our recommendation and position that there need be no further change to the park configuration, notwithstanding what staff have put before you in their report. The third point has to do with cost sharing. The staff report are acknowledging that the 2 site-specific applications, Rotary, or the Larencore and Sesta lands, will be providing for cash in lieu of parkland. The balance of parkland will be secured either by way of land, the equivalent Planning Act requirements, or by way of cash in lieu. In this case, the Mulcon property does provide parkland in the amount of about 2.2 hectares, which we believe to be appropriate. The final comment is I have 5 basic points of the staff report I wanted to emphasize. First and foremost, there is a provision we've made in our plan for a looping water main, which is one of the staff report items. We believe we can fulfill that, and we've contemplated it on the screen on the left side to provide for that as a public access easement. We do not support the city's position of a larger park, and based on their feedback, cash in lieu of parkland for each of the 2, Sesta and Larencore, and the balance of parkland to be provided by Mulcon in the order of 0.2 hectares. The next comment has to do with the location. It's our position that the location as shown on the plan, not only does it have support of the landowner implementing it, but it provides an opportunity to connect to a much larger open space system and respond to the varied needs of amenity spaces that will take place in other sections of this plan. The last couple of comments have to do with the single pond or a 2-pond scenario. And I just would remark that this plan provides the opportunity for there to be a phased pond in the location as shown together, and this actual location does allow those 2 ponds to be side by side. The staff recommended plan does not have the connectivity of those 2 swim pond cells, which is problematic. Finally, in summary form, and I would just simply note very quickly that there are a series of notes that can't be seen in plain view on the screen, but we have some concerns with the specific notes of the staff recommended plan. The vast majority of them are satisfactory, but again, there's some specific concerns. It would be our request that the committee endorse the notes that reflect the landowner's preferred plan. And in summary, very quickly, as I mentioned, the tertiary plan has been fully integrated. It has the support of technical studies, infrastructure, stormwater analysis, urban design function, and has the support of the majority owners, which was the specific request that came about of the deferral. So we now have a plan that supports their needs. The parkland, in our view, has been adequately sized and would fulfill the Planning Act requirements as shown on our tertiary plan. The city's version is not something that the landowners support as presented in the staff report. And it is with that understanding that it is my request on behalf of the owners as a land use planner that the tertiary plan can be adjusted in the future. Conceptual things are to be changed as MOCONS or Rotary comes forward, but this provides a sufficient framework in an integrated fashion, and that it is not binding, it's non-statutory. And finally, there are implementation measures that can be secured through conditions of approval, and it is my request that the committee approve the landowner Weston revised plan, which is before you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just remind members of the committee we'll hear all the delegations and then you can ask questions at that time. Thank you. Our next person is Daniel Artenosi. Come on down.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I should say good afternoon. I'm going to ask, as Mr. Davis had asked as well, if we can just switch the order if you'll allow it. Ms. Flynn Guglieldi, who's here on behalf of SESTA, which is another landowner in the tertiary plan area, would prefer to go next, and then I would follow if that's agreeable to the committee.
Okay, can I get a motion to reverse as suggested? Moved by Councilor Palashi. All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you. Mary Flynn, you can come on down, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mary Flynn Guglietti, and I am the solicitor representing SESTA. And just for the record, I did, on behalf of all of the landowners, send a letter to the council through your legal counsel, Ms. Andrea Wilson-Peebles, on October the 16th, 2019, and I hope you do have that letter in front of you, and attached to that letter was the Weston proposal that you see on the screen above you. Now, I've now had an opportunity to see the staff report that we received this morning, and I'd just like to point out to you on page 2 what they say about tertiary plans. A tertiary plan is a non-statutory planning document required in specific areas identified by the city to show how multiple parcels can be developed in a holistic and coordinated manner. Owners currently developing their lands are required to show that their plans do not impede the future development of other lands in close proximity. Tertiary plans are illustrative and are not binding on landowners. They are often amended as formal as development applications proceed. That's the wording of your own staff. What you have in front of you is a tertiary plan that has been coordinated by the 4 participating landowners. Through the necessary studies, through numerous meetings with staff, the CVC, and about 2.5 years or longer, actually since 2016, of going back and forth. There are 2 applications that are currently in front of the LPAT, and they were put in front of the LPAT due to the fact that their applications couldn't be dealt with because the tertiary plan had not been approved. We are now asking to go forward with our applications in compliance with this tertiary plan. This tertiary plan is a plan that has been worked out with all of the landowners. And it is one that does exactly what a tertiary plan is supposed to do. And that's to show holistically how this area can be developed in a fashion of coordination amongst the landowners with respect to numerous and important things, such as the road configuration, such as the location of the stormwater management ponds, the staking of the top of bank, the buffers, all of which, and the density spread throughout. It has not been easy to come to this agreement with all of the landowners. And the last time that we were deferred, it was because MOCON was not a participating member. They've now come to the table. Council asked us to go back and work with them. We've worked with them. We now have a solution. This plan works. But now we're being told that the park isn't big enough. But if you look at the previous report that came from your planning staff that was pointed out to you earlier by Mr. Guder when he was up here, the area, in fact, for the park that was being shown for recommendation and approval by your own planning staff was a park of 2.33 hectares. And suddenly, in less than 2 or 3 weeks, They're now asking for 0.4 hectares. And I submit to you, why was 0.23 acceptable and now it's not acceptable? What has changed? What's different? And I submit to you that with respect to the landowners, you have to bear in mind that it isn't just the size of this park. There are 4 separate landowners. Each of them will have their own amenity areas, tot lots, etc., spread throughout this, all of which are important functions, backyards, etc. All of that has been worked out in the site-specific applications and will be worked out in the site-specific applications for MOCON and as well for Rotary if necessary. The other thing that you have to bear in mind is the location of the park. The proposed park and the plan in front of you, the Weston plan I'll call it, is immediately abutting green space. It therefore is going to permit a much greater area for people to enjoy because it is connected to the green space. Whereas in the one proposed in the staff report is further up and does not have that connectivity. As a matter of fact, the stormwater management pond for MOCON is going to be located below and be an impediment to getting into the green space. The plan in front of you with the 2 stormwater ponds, it's not really 2, it's one with connectivity. They can be built in phases. It's basically one stormwater management pond, but in 2 phases, and that should satisfy staff as well. This has been a very long, tedious, and difficult road. All of the landowners have participated. The reports that are necessary and required have been filed and provided. This is an opportunity to move forward for all of the landowners in a very positive fashion and allow all the landowners to work exactly the way tertiary plans are supposed to work, that we're supposed to work in a coordinated fashion. We've done that. We want council to support that to allow us to move forward now. And that the requests by staff, A, seem contradictory to their earlier report, and B, simply don't make good sense. Happy to answer any questions that you might have in this regard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe now is it Daniel? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name, as you've identified, sir, is Daniel Artenosi, and I'm here on behalf of Larencore Holdings, Inc., and that is one of 4 landowners that are involved in this tertiary plan process. My client owns the properties that are municipally known as 1817 and 1831 Queen Street West, and for some context, that would be the parcel that is identified with an outline of red hatching towards the eastern section of the tertiary plan area. I'm not going to duplicate the submissions, but suffice it to say I adopt and support the submissions of Mr. Guder and Ms. Flynn Guglietti. I will, however, propose to provide a bit more background, and as Ms. Flynn Guglietti also advised, I'm also happy to answer any questions, to provide further context as to how far we've come over a fairly extensive period of time. And the backdrop to this process is that both Larencore in CESTA, that be my client and Ms. Flynn Guglietti's clients, have submitted applications for their own properties, which were comprised of official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, and draft plan of subdivision. These applications have been deemed complete since July of 2016, so we're going past 3 years. I haven't been involved in the process from the very get-go, but I have been involved in the process for a couple of years now. The applications, as the committee knows, are now before the LPAT, and we have a hearing scheduled for January 2020. We still do not have a formal position from the city in respect of the applications, with less than 4 months to prepare for and advance a hearing before LPAT over the course of 10 days. And I have to say, in my personal experience, that's an extraordinary circumstance. But the reason that we're confronted with this is because the landowners have been committed, have agreed to deferring timelines that had been projected by staff and the landowners throughout this process in order to come to the best, most implementable result that could be achieved for the tertiary plan area. And I'm happy to say that we're there now. Now, we attended in September, just about a month ago, with the benefit of a positive staff report at the time, recommending approval. And I won't get into all the details, but as Mr. Guder and Ms. Flynn Guglietti have advised, one of the central issues that's coming up in the current staff report is the size of a park. The size of the park is nearly doubled from what was supported by staff in September. But putting that aside for the moment, our clients had the benefit of a positive staff report, and we were asked at that time to defer to put the brakes on yet again so that we could continue to work through issues. And I can candidly advise our clients were not happy to do that at that time. We had been at this for 3 years, but we did. And I was part of initial discussions following that deferral meeting where the landowners sat together, rolled up their sleeves, put aside bad feelings, and established a framework that would enable all of the landowners to resolve outstanding issues. We agreed on a framework. Staff was at the table when that framework was agreed to. We confirmed the framework through written correspondence. Again, staff was apprised of that and copied throughout the process. And after the framework is established, we worked with the framework, we established the issues to be resolved. And the purpose of that investigation was to determine whether or not additional density could be proposed or accommodated rather for the Mocon site. And the investigation was to be focused on the technical requirements that would need to be satisfied to determine that more could be built. That was comprised of some transportation study, some engineering study. Those were completed, and the reports came back positive that more could be accommodated. Nowhere in the agreed upon framework was there an agreement that we would be looking to expand the size of the park. And I'm just reiterating that point over and over because it has to be emphasized. We've been operating from the understanding that critical threshold issues have been resolved, and we had a focused mandate to explore, which we've done. And now we're left with an improved tertiary plan, and importantly, it's implementable. So I urge the committee to reconsider the recommendation by staff, having looked at the considerable efforts that have been expended by all the landowners coming together to establish a framework that works, that can be implemented, that will be serviced by adequate amenity areas, indoor, outdoor, and that provides a very rare and I would say unique opportunity to celebrate the surrounding landscape. And that's part of what Ms. Flinguglietti was speaking to, the integration of this park in this location of this size, being a natural location and an appropriate size to integrate into the surrounding natural heritage fabric. So our request to the committee is that the committee recommend the council approve the landowner's tertiary plan so that the landowners that are currently before the tribunal can also resolve those appeals that are just a few months away. Subject to any questions that you may have, that resolves and satisfies my submissions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, I remind members of the committee will have an opportunity after the delegations, and now I believe it's Neil Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me give you a little background on the Mocons. They have the nursery operation in the middle of the tertiary plan. They're still operating. In fact, if you look in the Gage Park, the flowers in Gage Park have been supplied by my client and all the baskets and everything else. That's their business. That's why they were behind, quite frankly, in being involved in this process because they were running their nursery business. They're not developers, and found it difficult to commit to an expense undetermined to participate in this process. Someday we'll have a conversation how we do that better because people shouldn't be shut out because they're not developers and haven't got the money. But that's why they were behind. But since January, they've had us involved in Terry Corsiac and have indicated their willingness to participate and have been since that time. I'll sort of jump to July when Terry Corsiac's office put this tertiary plan before staff. And staff had a tertiary plan, and I don't know how we move forward and backward. If we look at the original tertiary plan, okay, that's the one. Yeah, thank you. So if you look at that, we were not content for a number of reasons. Put a storm pond on our lands, and at that time it was serving other people's lands. And for those who've been out to the property, and some of you have, and I thank you for going, that is the finest part of their property, and truthfully one of the finest parcels in this city for development. It is a spectacular opportunity to do something special there, and we were going to put a storm pond on it. That was a staff recommendation. We were not happy with that, and the city shouldn't have been happy with that, quite frankly. And so, and we had the park, a .231 acre park, not a .4. We had a .231. That was your staff recommendation in September. That got deferred. We've had meetings since. We have joined the landowner group. We paid our money. We paid for the additional reports to be done to support the density on the Mocon piece. And we paid to have the storm pond looked at so it can move and be adjacent to the Cesta storm pond. Traffic was looked at, sanitary and water. That's what we were asked to look at. Yeah. So you can see the two storm ponds are side by each. I think everybody agrees with that should happen. Traffic is not a problem with the additional units, sanitary water, lots of capacity, quite frankly, to make this work. So we're down to, and I want to concentrate a little bit differently before I get to the park. If you look at the two storm ponds there, it's not intended to identify two ponds. It's intended to identify storm ponds that will become one. What we have offered up is that it should be designed as one. We're behind. We're not ready to leave the lands tomorrow. So the pond will be built in two phases. So we're all on the same page with staff that it should be one pond. That allows for a smaller footprint for the pond, saves costs, allows for greater amenity for this city, quite frankly, to be accommodated in that area. This is the staff recommended configuration. The problem with that, because you've displaced the park and you put the park up on two roads, which in a book somewhere it says it should be on two roads. But if you look at the contiguity between the two parcels for the storm pond, it's two ponds with a connector. That is not one pond. That's going to be a bigger pond done that way than if, in fact, you flip it and you put the pond where it should be, so you have a long boundary where you can expand the pond into the Mocon piece when they're ready to develop. And so let me say that we're all in agreement that there should be one pond. City staff have put it in the wrong place in order to be able to do that efficiently in the right way. So let me then talk about the park for a minute. It can't be that you walk another 100 yards south and that's inconvenient in some fashion. It's not central enough to the residents of the area. So why would you choose to put a park on two roads as opposed to backing on? And you can see how much land in that purple line is being given for green space. Looks over the Legends Golf Course. Spectacular opportunity to create a vista so the park becomes bigger than it is, quite frankly. And so even if you start to head that you need a bigger park, don't put it up on the road. Put it down where it should be so it can function as a public amenity with the green space that you will own next door and the storm pond, which you will own. Make that all work together, but put the park in the right place. And let me talk for a second about size.
Sorry, can I just get a motion as we've gone beyond 5? Moved by Councillor Willens. All in favor? Carried. Please proceed.
Let me talk about size. And my client is the one that's carrying the burden of this additional size. My client has put on his plan a park that meets the regulatory framework of 5%. He's doing it for his lands. You're asking that owner to pick up the park obligation for the rest of the tertiary plan beyond the 0.2. And no explanation how that's going to happen, but that's what you're asking. If you look at other municipalities, they call these parks best parks. They deliberately go out of their way to put parks beside green space because of the opportunity it offers for something different. Why would we put a park on roads like we do everywhere else? This is your chance to do something different and work with the environment that is there. And for those who've been there, you know it is just one of the most remarkable views you can have is at the south end of the Mocon property. Others have said, the private amenity space. Well, let's not lose that because 86% of the units, out of all the units here, are going to be served by private amenity space in addition to the park. 86% of the units. So do you need a park of Point 4? The problem, if you insist on Point 4 and you put the storm pond where it is, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. We lose 11 units, but I don't think it's going to work anyways. You're going to have 2 ponds. So I'm asking you to not fixate on Point 4. Be creative about how you design the storm pond in the right location so it can be 1 pond, not have as big a footprint, offer more room to, quite frankly, program the area around the storm pond as part of the park, the amenity being offered to the area. And at the end of the day, it's our client. No one has said to us, how do we get compensated for putting on park for other people? So I'm asking you to support the landowner plan. We've come together. There can be some tweaking here and there, but they've got it wrong on that location of the park, and the park's too big to make this work. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 speakers, and I'll suggest we reverse the order as well, just to match the delegations, but no pun intended. I will go to Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. This has been an interesting time with this proposal. We've been involved with it, Councillor Medeiros and I have been involved with it for quite a while now, and we were responsible for sending it back numerous times to have you guys work it out rather than us work it out. And that was, I think, what has happened now. The landowners have worked it out amongst themselves with help from the city, with help from our planning, with help from legal. I do have some questions. Neil, you answered one of them, that about 85% of the units will be taken care of by their own amenities. Do we have the reverse number? Do we have a number on how much of the other land is going to be amenities?
Ryan, you may have.
So through you to the question, each of the site-specific lands have their own detailed draft plans and site plans that have yet to unfold. So there isn't a specific delineation of a certain size in each of those plans, and I'm referring specifically to the Cesta lands and the Larencore lands. What I can tell you is that through some of the urban design work that we did, which is on file as part of one of the many studies we did, it actually identifies the programming of some of that space, particularly where it's centered in and around the Rotary lands. There'd be on-site amenity adjoining the buildings, and it would serve the function of that intended type of dwelling unit. For the Larencore lands, there's actually a combination of rear yard amenity, rooftop amenity, and some concentrated areas as well that would be common shared space. Similarly so with the types of units proposed for the Cesta lands, you'll see that it sort of comprises that orange area. It would be a similar multiple attached type of format that would have an amenity space, not dissimilar to other medium density type of developments where there is a common sort of amenity. And that can take a variety of forms. Typically, that's set out through the site plan process. So the city's staff report identifies, again, cash and lieu parkland being appropriate for those 2 parcels, and the combination of the on-site amenity space would essentially be private common space to be programmed still yet through the evolution of those applications.
Okay, thank you very much. To our staff, why was the previous parkland approved? Why was that enough?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, while staff were supportive of the plan at that time, it was with the the understanding that from a general standpoint, from a conceptual standpoint, that it was seen as being appropriate. And it's right, as it was said through the delegations, that the tertiary plans are meant to identify really in a conceptual way how the area is to develop. That is true entirely. And so really at that time, that plan, it showed a park of that size, the location of the park, together with the idea that the conceptual nature of the plan, it was thought to be appropriate, and staff recommended approval of it with the revision that had occurred with the MOCON lands and the detail of the MOCON lands being then incorporated into the plan. It identified a park that was then a little bit different. It was adjacent to the valley. It appeared in some way a little smaller visually to us on the plan. There was concern that had come about by way of that revised plan, by way of its adjacency to the valley, not because it was adjacent to the valley, but it was irregular in shape. And it was identified by our open space and park staff that it looked like it would be problematic to program that space with all the formal recreation sets and such for kids. So the idea of its inappropriateness by way of that revised plan was identified. And so it was then important for us to work with the landowners towards a change for those reasons. And so the change as we're proposing is to, yes, shift it away from the valley's edge so that it's just more regular in shape, easier to be programmed. But the issue of the size of it really was just identified in a more clear sense. While the size by way of the old plan, perhaps staff, and it's likely staff would have been identifying through those later plans of subdivision rezoning applications for the MOCON site that we would need to arrive at a 0.4. It wasn't identified at that particular time. But we'd like to put clarity to the matter now and work towards a better park because of the concerns that we saw with the revised plan.
Okay, thanks,
Alan. If I may add as well, through the chair. So what was identified through many of the presentations, the delegations today, were some of the, why go from 0.2 to 0.4? The major difference between the original proposal and what you're seeing in terms of the staff proposal and the developer proposal is the lands at the very bottom of the tertiary plan. That's adding 106 units. Mm-hmm. They weren't there before.
Yep.
And those 106 units and the residents that will be residing there will require park. And so that justifies the increase in terms of the size. The 0.4 represents 0.5, sorry, the 5%. I'm getting all my numbers mixed up. But that represents what the Planning Act would require.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, no, fully understandable. Another question just for planning. It appears to me, and it was brought forward by one of the delegates, that having the park where it is right on this diagram here allows a greater integration with the valley land. But in the new proposal, there's very little of the park that in staff's new proposal, there's very little of the park that would actually allow people to look out, to enjoy for a bike trail or something into the valley land. So I'm just wondering, this leads me to my next question. That's why I asked Michael to join us. Question for you, Michael. In County Court, we've got the SNAP program going. We've got a stormwater management project there that is fully integrated with bike paths, walking paths, full active transportation, and a number of amenities around it for sitting, for viewing, for enjoying. I'm just wondering why storm management ponds are not all built with those same amenities to make that stormwater management pond area park-like in any other description, so that in this case here, if that were to happen, there's a lot of white space around the stormwater management ponds up there. If that were programmed into bike trails, walking trails, viewing out over onto the valley lands, and combining with the park, I'm no genius, but it looks to me like you would come up with the same sort of thing. You would come up with
a 4 to 5% parkland dedication, but we're utilizing some of the stormwater management area as program parks. Is it possible to do something like that?
Through you, Chair, I'm not involved with the park discussion, but most of our stormwater ponds are designed as community amenity spaces. So I would say 90% of our ponds have trails around them, and we try to integrate seating where appropriate and trying to create that passive recreation beyond just the infrastructure that it does. So those ponds will be designed with some kind of community amenity, whether trail or passive seating areas. But the connections into the valley would be difficult. There's a very steep valley there.
Okay. And from an environmental point of view, is there any difference between these two stormwater management parks being one and the other drawing where you've got two separate and distinct ponds?
I'm not, through you, Chair, I'm not a stormwater management
environmentally speaking.
Environmentally speaking, two ponds are not desired by the city. We like to minimize the number of ponds. That's more maintenance in the long term. So wherever possible, we'd like to have one stormwater pond built and designed.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much, Michael. So it just, I don't know, we've been going back and forth on this for a while. And these plans can be changed. Once we agree on a tertiary plan, whether it's this one or whether it's staff's or whether it's the original tertiary plan that comes forward, those plans can be changed, correct? At site plan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So at the time of rezoning application or plan of subdivision, yes, they can be changed. What staff is wanting to ensure, though, that the plan, the tertiary plan really at this point in time identifies things to an accurate enough extent, though. We wouldn't want anyone to see the tertiary plan and have some misunderstanding as to what staff are going to be looking for at that later point in time when the development applications do come in. So with us knowing that staff is going to be trying to achieve a 0.4 hectare park here, we would like to see it shown then as that 0.4 hectare so that when it is the MOCONs or perhaps the developer of the MOCON property comes in at that time, they aren't proposing a plan that is then deficient in that way, and then it becomes problematic for them to satisfy that item.
Okay. I'm just trying to weigh these options here, because to me, from an environmental standpoint, from a land use standpoint, and I'm no planner, but it just appears that having a park that overlooks a very nice valley land would be my preference. We've heard environmentally, a single stormwater management pond is preferable. We did have a workshop not too long ago on the cost. I don't know if somebody's going to be bringing that up to clean them. Yeah.
So through Mr. Chairman, just maybe a couple things that I'd like to put out on the table for everyone's just understanding. Firstly, with respect to the stormwater ponds that are identified on staff's plan.
Yep.
So really the key here for staff is that there be one pond ultimately. We've understood from the landowners that they have no objection to ultimately having one pond. We want to ensure that will be the case because what I'm understanding from our engineers is that, yes, it'll be much cheaper for our long-term maintenance of the ponds if it is singular. It's designed that way. And so the way in which it's shown here on our proposed and recommended tertiary plan is for it to ultimately have that one pond. So there is some reference by the landowners that there may be some problems associated with having this design be one pond. We've heard from our staff that it can be accomplished here, and if it was that there has to be some modest modification to the plan to ensure that there would be one pond here, we would do that. Secondly, just with respect to the location of the park and having a 0.4 hectare park, let's say, really located a little bit to the north as it's shown here, or having a 0.4 hectare park that's located along the valley. Perhaps what we can do is hear from, we have a parks planning staff here with us today, so it relates to Mr. Roger DeCunez with our parks group. He's with us today, not necessarily for this item, but for the item that's following on the agenda following this item. But perhaps Roger might be able to provide some insight as to whether staff from park standpoint would see an issue with the park located really in its current location as proposed by staff, or whether it would be along the valley. From my standpoint, what I would say is that, and really what I've just come to understand from some conversation with staff, is that the 0.4 hectare, the size issue, is one that we find quite important. You know, if it is that the park was to be located along the valley, but in a 0.4 hectare configuration, that's an item that staff may be willing to support. But if we wanted to understand that in a thorough way, perhaps Mr. Roger DeCuna might be able to speak to that.
Okay, so that could be done later, though, at a later stage, if the tertiary plan's approved. Okay, thank you. Actually, I don't need to hear. Thank you for coming, but I will. There's more speakers on the board, so I'll let them. Thank you very much, staff.
Okay, Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the reason why we were pushing this off so long is because we weren't sure where our flower orders were going to come fall. So I'm glad that we have that all covered now. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. I do not like stormwater management ponds. They cost too much to maintain. I'm not sure why there's no comments in the report, or ever has been comments of trying to get either a pumping station or something for the stormwater up to the north in that nice big stormwater management pond just on the north side of Queen, or some kind of filtration station to put something down into the valley. These pictures that we have do nothing. They don't give it any kind of justice. All of the white areas that are in the south and then in between are all green spaces and valley lands, and it's like Mr. Davis said, it's actually a beautiful piece, not just in the south, but kind of all over. Our parkland, in terms of it being 4 acres, I don't believe that it was as important as it is to us now in the beginning, and I'm not sure why. I know what staff have said, but I don't see the reasoning behind it. We've asked what the landowners have done. We asked for this to go back and for them to figure it out, and this is what's before us. So I'm happy to put forward what the landowners are requesting, and I'd also appreciate that it be provided in some sort of comments that we look at removal of the stormwater management ponds and incorporate something else that can be done to get the water to the north or get it down to the valley through some kind of filtration system. And that's what I'm asking for us to put forward.
So we have a motion. So your motion, Councillor Palashi, is you're putting forth a motion to endorse the Queen Street Tertiary Plan in Wards 3 and 4. Okay. So we have a Councillor Fortini.
Thank you. Just to collaborate on Councillor Palashi on the storm, does the land slope downhill or goes uphill? Can we put a pumping station there?
Through Mr. Chairman, myself don't know. I don't know that we have any staff here that would be able to answer that detailed technical matter today.
I think staff. Yep.
Answer that. The area south of Queen is actually subject to its own drainage catchment area, which does have its outlets to the south, effectively. So I'm not aware of it being feasible to pump to the north. In fact, the flow is to the south.
So a pumping station could be put in? Is that
if it's of assistance, this scheme actually contemplates for some of the individual blocks, tanks and pump scenarios to address the councillor's comments and yours, which would affect in reducing the overall need for swim ponds in their traditional form, and that's customary when you've got a higher density. You can incorporate stormwater tanks, for example, that allow collection of the stormwater and discharge at a certain rate. So the dark sort of red areas, the rotary lands, are going to be contemplated for that type of a system, which would reduce the need for the storm potter being as their size. So that will assist in some of the commentary that you've raised as well.
Okay, members of the committee, then we have, I believe then the motion.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the motion from Councillor Paleshi is 1, to receive the staff report 7.6. 2 is to approve the tertiary plan, which is Appendix 9, which is the revised landowner plan dated October 16th. 3 is to receive the original staff report 11.3 and take no action on that staff report. And the fourth part is to receive the 4 delegations 11.2.
Okay. Members of the committee, a motion has been asked. All in favor? Wait.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the one on the screen, I understand, is Appendix 9 in the report, 7.6, and it represents the landowner's plan dated October 16th, and that's the one that's being voted on for approval.
Okay, is there any? Okay, Councillor Fortini.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's the motion from Councillor Paleshi.
And that's also moving the pond, pumping station and all, is that part?
Those comments be incorporated. That's very clear.
Okay, Councillor Vicente.
Thank you. I'd like to just get clarification on which plan it is that we are moving ahead with. It's the one on the screen, the staff plan. I'm sorry, this is the developer's plan. But are we through the chair, are we eliminating the stormwater management ponds?
I'm asking for that option to be incorporated and for them to figure it out.
Let me clarify. The intention behind this particular plan is that the pond be a single pond developed in 2 phases in that location, as opposed to a further separation if you go to the city's version. I understand from our engineer, and I didn't have the opportunity to raise this initially, but that this configuration is actually problematic to achieve because of this physical separation between the 2 cells. This scenario allows for one pond to be built and then a retrofitting of that pond adjacent to it in this configuration. So while there are 2 symbols represented, that's the intention of this plan.
And currently there's no ponds on the site. Correct.
Okay, if I can move that the chair be heard. Thank you. Just to staff, again, you had addressed, Councillor Bowen had a question, and you said that the park size could be addressed at a later time. Is that correct?
So, yes, Mr. Chairman, the tertiary plan can be revised at later points in time when other development applications come on. What was said by myself during the exchange was that staff would like, though, to try to ensure that all of the requirements that we anticipate having at that point in time are identified really as accurately as possible on the tertiary plan. So in that respect, staff's request and proposal today is that we have a 0.4 hectare sized park identified on the plan, greater than the size of the park that's identified here on this plan.
And then you brought someone from our parks department to explain to us, so if I'm understanding that we can program on a 0.4, but we can't program on a 0.26. Was that correct?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm generally understanding that, yes, our park staff would ultimately like to have a 0.4 hectare park, so it satisfies the need for the community. With respect to programming, the reference that I had previously was that the shape of the park as shown here, it would be difficult to program because of its irregular shape. If it was, in that respect, if we're talking about a 0.2 hectare size park, a 0.2 park that's square would be easier to program than a 0.2 hectare size park that is triangular in shape. So this configuration identified on this version of the tertiary plan is problematic for staff in that way.
Okay. And did you want park staff to elaborate on anything, or?
Only if it was that the committee saw benefit in receiving information from park staff.
Well, since you're sitting down, if you can provide some opinion from our park staff.
Sure. So when we were looking at the plan in terms of taking into account setbacks and the buffers to our facilities, we were seeing from the previous plan and what was proposed in the revised plan that there might be some constraints in what we would be looking for with the type of facilities that would go in there. So we were looking for providing an option where we would freely be able to, look at amenity space that we would be able to program the spot appropriately.
Okay, thank you. So as there are no further questions or comments, then we have the motion moved by Councillor Palashi with the landowner's suggested tertiary plan. All in favor? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion is defeated. Our next, so I guess now we have motion to receive staff report.
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
How many members are here today?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And so sorry, what was the vote?
5, 4.
It was 5-4. So what do we do now? Approve the staff's recommendation.
Well,
Make it on the board and ask a question?
Yep, so now we have staff report. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to staff. The drip line that's shown, it's a 10-meter buffer?
Through Mr. Chairman, so there is a 10-meter buffer that applies adjacent to the valley, and yes, it would be from the drip line. Essentially, it's always the greater of whether it's the drip line or the floodplain, and there's some other considerations, but generally, yes.
This plan that we're looking at right here that was just, I guess, defeated, that 10 meters plus if the stormwater management pond on the east side didn't go through, including the 10 meters, could that be programmed in terms of all of a park all the way up to Street B? And that gives an additional how many acres roughly to the park?
So sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe the question is, can the 10-meter buffer area be programmed for some recreation purposes?
Including that, and if the stormwater management pond, like one of the delegates had indicated, if it's not needed, could that be then turned into the park?
And through Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the 10-meter buffer areas are to remain really free and clear of really programmed items. So really it's there to accommodate solely vegetation.
Okay. I just know other parks in other areas, specifically ours, that have paths that are running along the areas much more sensitive than this area that has exercise equipment and whatnot. So it's obviously programmed in other areas of Brampton. And then what about the stormwater management pond? If that's not needed in the future, and I don't know who makes that decision, I guess it's us. But could then that be turned into a park?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, if it is ultimately determined through a detailed development application, rezoning and plan of subdivision, let's say with respect to the MOCON lands, if it's found ultimately by staff, the experts on the matter, that as well as with their consulting engineers as well, that there's no need for a stormwater pond, then the lands can be utilized for other purposes, yes, and we'll have to look at that point in time really what the appropriate uses that should occupy that space should be.
I thought that kind of everybody was kind of looking for, we requested that the landowners go back and work things out, and that's what they brought forward. So I think they brought back what we asked them to do. So I wasn't sure why it was defeated, and nor did I want to meddle in somebody else's area, Councilor Medeiros, but nobody else was putting anything forward, and that's why I stepped up.
So as I appreciate your comments, Councillor Pellecci, geared towards myself, my understanding, normally staff don't get involved in these type of exercises. We've encouraged, and I know staff, when you got private interest between landowners, we gave them a process, and we've actually gone beyond what our normal activity and our obligations are. And I think we got to a good, I think the city staff plan does provide an opportunity for respective landowners to move forward, and respects at the same time our City of Brampton's interests, and ensuring that we have good, proper public planning. And certainly I think that's what we all strive here to do. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No one has discussed this as yet, so I'll bring it up. Councillor Sanchez and I had the opportunity to see this property, and we agree that it is fantastic and offers an amazing location for people to live and to enjoy the natural environment as it is around the city of Brampton. Particularly this place with a view of the Valleylands, it is spectacular. I know other members of council have highlighted that point. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, what is, if we go with the staff recommendation, what is the understanding with respect to residential area number 3 as listed on the staff plan? And if we could put that up on the screen. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the medium density block at the bottom, as defined by the applicant, is proposed to be 106 units. It would have to be evaluated through a comprehensive development application, but certainly the plan as laid out is something that staff could support going forward on this plan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, 106 units on how many floors?
Their proposal was up to 6 floors.
Is there an opportunity here to see that number changed in the future by the proponents?
Yes, so, as indicated by both staff and certainly the landowners group, is the tertiary plan is conceptual. If there is a development application that supports a higher density on that particular parcel, staff could look at it. We are certainly aware of the fact that the landowner's plan does have some townhouse units along where the park is, representing 13 units. If that density transfer was to go to the medium density block, staff would not be opposed of that through a comprehensive development application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Woolens.
I'll call a question so we can get on with the meeting.
Okay, well, I guess, okay, so Councillor Bowman would like to move the staff report. I believe Councillor Pellecci previously was at the different motion, moved the delegations, and it was the delegations and another. So regarding the delegations, is it moved by Councillor Bowman, or is it all failed?
So the original motion I understood was the 4-part motion, including receiving the delegations. When you took the vote only on Appendix 9, which is the revised landowners plan, which lost. So the staff report is still available if a member wishes to move that, as well as receipt of the original report 11.3, delegations 11.2, and the new staff report 7.6.
Okay, all moved by Councillor.
No, I don't recall any members separated.
Okay, so we'll go then with the motion that moved by Councillor Bowman to do everything which you have just outlined and move staff's recommended Appendix 10. Okay, is that clear for everyone? All in favor? I would like to request a recorded vote, yes or, let's just,
Recorded vote is now open. Members can please push their buttons. All members have voted, and the motion carries unanimously 10-0.
thank you. Our next item of business, I believe, I don't have anything else here. Oh, okay, they were pulled, yes. Councillor Vicente, you had pulled heritage minutes? So we'll just get a couple minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. While I asked the clerk to place a motion up on the screen, with respect to the approval of the minutes from the Brampton Heritage Board of October 15th, 2019, there was a motion that was considered by the board, motion HB 065-2019, with respect to an item, notice of intention to demolish a dwelling at 11962 the Gore Road in Ward 10. This is a road widening and expansion that is happening along the Gore Road, which necessarily affects two properties, but specifically one which, through all of the best intentions of staff, all of the best intentions of heritage planners here at the city, the planning department, and the region, there is no way to reasonably protect this heritage property. The region sought expressions of interest from the community and from any potential stakeholders to acquire the property and have it relocated. That did not succeed. And we had a quite interesting conversation, quite at length, at the Heritage Board on other potential avenues. And at the end of the day, it was the opinion of the Heritage Board that the property should be allowed to be approved for demolition. And so we have here a motion that requires our approval here that says that whereas the Brampton Heritage Board has been presented with numerous options explored by the City of Brampton and Region Appeal staff to save and or relocate the heritage resource located at 11962 the Gore Road, and whereas it has been determined that all efforts to save this resource were not feasible, therefore be it resolved that the subject heritage resource be approved for demolition subject to the following conditions. A, that the property at 11962 the Gore Road be removed from the Municipal Heritage Register. B, that the demolition of the dwelling at 11962 the Gore Road be permitted. C, that prior to the demolition of the dwelling, the Region Appeal continue to work with the City of Brampton on possible options for the relocation of the dwelling, and if suitable options should arise. D, that should a potential relocation option arise, City of Brampton Heritage staff be kept involved in the matter. E, that brick and other items of significance as identified by a qualified heritage consultant be salvaged for use in a commemorative feature. F, that the salvaged materials be appropriately stored in a secure location until their reuse.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor, Councillor Pelosi?
So, Councilor Vicente, you're asking for, are you moving this? The Heritage Board is moving this, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Heritage Board provided us with their position on this matter, and it was after a quite lengthy conversation that evening.
So, in the motion, I'm getting that the property at 11962 Gore Road be removed from the Heritage Registry, that we can go ahead and demolish it, but if they can find a place to put it, they'll do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the Heritage Board received a briefing from city staff, Heritage Planning, and the regional staff that the subject property was listed for sale so that it could be relocated to a new location and kept whole. But after a period of time, that attempt did not succeed. However, the spirit of the motion here is that in between this day and the day when it must be absolutely demolished, staff will continue to explore that option, and if a solution can be found, that they of course would exercise that. But failing that, council today is approving that the property be removed from the Heritage Register and demolished.
And do we own the property, or we're going to because it's in our way?
From my understanding, the property is owned by the region.
The region owns the property.
Will that be correct?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion moved by, motion moved by Councilor Vicente to receive the minutes. All in favor? And approve. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item again, we are now on to council question period. Do members of committee have any questions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is item 11.1, the deferred item regarding the Tanyaville Phase 3 lands.
Oh, my apologies. Oh, yep. Okay, we have deferred. So we have item 11.1. Are there any? Councilor Santos, are you on the board? Yeah, go ahead.
And I guess they're not here. So in conversations, there you are. Hi, how are you? In conversation, just a quick update on this file. So in conversations with, in follow-up from the last planning committee, we had conversation with residents as well as the lawyer, Neil Davis. There were specific questions related to noise pollution, dust, as well as fencing to help alleviate some of the concerns of the residents. It is our understanding in speaking with Neil Davis, and this is just for you as well, in our meetings with him, that they are happy to look at those things. And in fact, with respect to dust and noise pollution, there are certain regulations that they have to abide by anyway. But certainly the fencing issue, they're very open to making that happen. So I just wanted to share that with any residents who are here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Santos. Councilor Singh?
Yeah, I just want to echo similar comments. I think that's a good compromise on the fence, and hope you know, the developers will be open to it. You know, I do feel bad for the residents, but it is the nature of development and city applications. But just hope we're aware that, you know, some of these residents did pay a premium, and you know, it's obviously heartfelt that school isn't coming, but it is what it is, and we hope the developer takes that into mind.
Okay. Councilor Santos, you're on the board again?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Through you, Chair, and Neil Davis is here. Just so that the residents know, I thought we would just summarize our meeting this morning between yourself and Councilor Vicente with respect to concerns that residents have.
Would you like to add Mr. Davis as a delegation?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so are you putting a motion to add him as
Yes,
a delegation?
please.
So a motion moved by Councilor Santos to add. Okay, carried. Thank you.
Just a question about residents' concern regarding noise pollution and the dust, as well as a request around fencing.
The first one, I think there are expectations from the city about dust control and how you manage a site, and we will, and I said I would convey that concern back to the developer. And on the fencing issue, the developer on Friday, we had a conversation, is committed to do a privacy wood fence around, to replace the chain link fence for all those that don't have it. The corner lots, in fact, have a wood privacy fence already, but But for that, they will pay to put a wood privacy fence in replacement of, and that can be a draft plan condition.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon?
Yeah, I just want to commend you, Mr. Davis. I think, I'm not sure if you had to, but it's a very classy move by you to work with the residents. Thanks so much.
Okay, so now I believe, so you're moving the staff report, Councillor Santos? Okay, so moved by Councillor Santos, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We are now on to Councillor question period. Any members of, no? Public question periods, anyone would like to ask a question? No. Our next meeting is November 4th at 7 p.m. Motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Everyone have a nice day.